Hi everyone, welcome. So glad you could join us today. We'll give just a second for those who are still in the process of joining, but a big hello to those who are already on the webinar with us. I do see some familiar names and also some new names. So it's really nice to meet you today. And we'll be bringing you today the part 2 of our online talent communication summit series. So let's go ahead and take a look together at the agenda for today. So go ahead and pull that up. So starting out, I'm going to be giving a knowledge session about the climate of talent communication in 2020. And don't miss it. Be sure to get your screenshot function ready because it's going to be power-packed with hot trend data from Potentialpark going into 2020. So right after that, we have Miki Johnson joining us from Job Portraits, and she is going to be telling us how to do authenticity, so ways that we can implement authenticity across the different career channels. And following Miki at 11 o'clock Eastern Time, we will be hearing from a panel, an expert panel, about navigating the talent funnel. So our CEO at Potentialpark, Torgil, will be moderating this session, and we'll be hearing from experts from Continental as well as an expert from L'Oreal. Really excited to introduce that and hear what they have to say today. Certainly not least, at 11:30 Eastern Time, we'll be hearing about the 5 essentials of employment marketing from Chris Malin. And Chris has been a top tech marketer for Google, Apple, eBay, so you won't want to miss that to hear kind of the marketing perspective of employer branding. So that is our agenda for today. We'll have a quick wrap up at the end and some reflections, as well as a quick highlight to those companies who ranked in the top 30 for the Potentialpark study in the US. So as you can see, we have a great lineup for today, and I'm really excited to just dive right in. But before we do, let's have a couple quick reminders. So be sure to have your screenshot tool ready because we're not going to be sending out this full webinar in its original format. So if there's particular slides that interest you, go in and grab a screenshot while you can. We'll also be available for questions and for follow-ups using the email us@potentialpark.com. And if there's a specific question you'd like us to answer during the sessions today, be sure to use the chat function or the question function, and at the end of each session, we can follow up on those. So really excited to dive in. Let's do it, and we're going to kick things off with a little video.
It has been an awful summer in Australia with extreme weather and terrible consequences. Thunderstorms and hail have been pelting eastern sections of the country, but strong winds have also created dust storms. Drought conditions and the bushfires remain a serious problem.
Tonight, Venice and some of its most famous landmarks submerged again.
Across Europe, blizzards have brought normal life to a standstill.
The National Weather Service is warning about a potentially historic wind event.
2.5 months of rainfall falling in just 24 hours.
Hurricane Dorian rapidly strengthening over the past 24 hours.
Fires are consuming the world's largest rainforest.
A 7.7 magnitude quake.
Today, our focus is on climate change.
Experts say that we have until 2030 to avoid catastrophe.
Climate change is all around us, and not only in a purely environmental sense. There are these factors, or elements as we'd like to call them, which are shaping the world of recruitment today. And these elements have a powerful influence on both candidates and companies alike. And we can either try to hide from them, like hiding from the hurricane we saw in the video just a minute ago, or we could try to fight it, kind of like when we fight through the waves as we swim out into the ocean water. Of course, we could also just sit back and watch, observe passively as the climate is changing around us. And sometimes it's easier and tempting to do that because we don't exactly understand everything that's going on. But if we take the time to understand these elements that are at play and we can dig deeper into the issues, we could possibly ride the waves or even ride the wind. You may be familiar, most likely, with the elements of water, earth, wind, and fire. And in our changing climate of talent, what is the water that will give life to our recruitment marketing efforts? What is the earth that we can stand upon? What are the winds that are propelling us forward? And lastly, do we see a fire or a light at the end of our recruitment funnel? Today, we're going to be looking at the climate of talent communication. What can we expect in the forecast for 2020? Well, recruitment starts with your employer brand, plain and simple. And this is so important because building a brand is all about generating awareness and getting onto the candidate's radar. One clear necessity when it comes to maximizing that awareness is capitalizing on the many analytical and data tools that exist today. When used correctly, analytics helps us to know whether we're reaching that target group of candidates. And for this reason, we see analytics as a source of life for your employer brand, just like water. Analytics helps us to digest information, data that we've collected over time, and to research potential trends that help us make decisions and improvements. Social media, for instance, is constantly changing. You cannot just put your chips on one particular channel and hope that that works. And it's also not the most effective strategy to evenly divide your resources between the channels. In today's competitive climate, we must understand both the candidates and the market to pick the right balance of each platform in terms of resources and content focus. And this is just one thing our research does at Potentialpark. So let's dive in together by looking at some key insights for 2020. So here we can see the story of how over time companies have used these 4 key platforms. So 100% of companies have been present on LinkedIn each year. Probably no surprise there. YouTube and Facebook remain important channels consistently with only a minor fluctuation through the years. And while Instagram is making a huge statement, so they've made major progress this year. As you can see, over the last 4 years, we've seen an increasing trend line with how many companies are investing in this platform. And we'll circle back to that after looking a little bit at the candidates' behaviors. So for candidates, we've seen some interesting trends over the last few years as well. We've not seen a substantial change with LinkedIn or YouTube, although YouTube did bounce back a little this year. But Facebook has been gradually dropping since 2018. For the first time ever, because of that, Instagram has taken the top spot this year. So let's focus on Instagram for just a moment. I think it's safe to say that Instagram is making a big splash in 2020 and cannot be ignored. And if you're a puns fan, you're going to love this because we have lots of puns in here for you. So let's just look at the difference between how many companies are using Instagram versus the candidates. We can see the big difference over time. And if you're not on Instagram yet, I would advise you to do so because it's a great place to target candidates over the coming year. Of course, different types of content are important on the different social media channels. This is one of the things we look at Potentialpark. So for instance, on Instagram, be sure that you have the content related to presentation of the workplace, as well as employee testimonials when it comes to Instagram. Now, for passive job seekers, social media is often the most effective way for employers to reach candidates, capitalizing on the customization of your hashtags, your posts, and stories, all of these things to be more effective. And having a strong social media presence is essential to connecting with candidates that are using these platforms multiple times a day, especially Instagram. On Instagram, only 12% of candidates reported following hashtags in the US, but since Instagram is actively promoting hashtags, this can be a great way of reaching people who are not following your account. If a candidate is out there and likes a post that has the hashtag, let's take an example, hashtag job seeker, then they are highly likely at some point to be promoted the hashtag job seeker. So if you're using that hashtag, they could see your content on their feed even if they're not following your account. And you can even use this to unite your social campaigns, like we've seen with hashtag Inside Amazon and hashtag Like a Bosch, personal favorite. And when candidates visit an Instagram account, of course they're looking at the posts, but we also see a growing interest in stories and highlights as well. 48% of candidates in the US say that they look at the stories when they visit a page. So that's nearly half. And we know that video content is very attractive and a very digestible form of media. So one common practice we saw during 2019 were intern takeovers of the stories on Instagram and other channels. And once that content has been generated, it's so easy to add that to your highlights for long-term viewing. So reusing the resources that you've poured into the stories. Now, for candidates that are intentionally looking for career information, they often visit your career website, your professional networks pages, and job boards. And all of these sources rely on your job ads, which can be optimized to ensure that they're reaching your dream candidates. You really want your job ad to be like a mini career website. So be sure to include these 3 key pieces of content. Compensation and benefits. Yes, it's difficult, but it needs to be there. Information about the recruitment process and application deadline. So these are things that might be tricky to implement, particularly information about the recruitment process. You probably already have this. So this is something you need to be including in your job ads. And the emergence of Google for Jobs has reinforced this demand for hard facts, since the search engine is prioritizing job ads with clear titles, job descriptions, and locations. So this is key to optimize your job ads so that candidates can find all your open roles, including on Google for Jobs. And in order to engage and convert candidates, it takes more than just clear information and structured job ads. They need to see some heart and soul from their prospective employers, and they really, really want this authenticity. What a buzzword for this year. But let's take a moment to reflect. So what does authenticity truly mean? It is the quality of being real or being true. And most literally, it is being in accordance with fact or reality. So let's think about this in a little bit of a more abstract way. When we think of a perfectly untouched earth, it becomes so idyllic and pure. And specifically, let's focus on a beach. So each piece of trash that gets dumped on that previously clean beach makes it become more and more polluted, and it gives off an increasingly bad image. And the same concept applies to companies and their image. You may not be able to control what pollution others are making, but you can clean your beach. And candidates sometimes may gravitate towards the pollution, but you have the power to project a new and authentic perspective by strategically responding. So where should this beach cleaning begin? Let's understand where the candidates are looking for information. It's a great place to start. In the US in particular, candidates are looking to professional networks like LinkedIn, followed by your career websites, and in third place, we find job boards and review platforms. But how does this change when we ask candidates where they're finding the most credible information, or what they believe is the most credible information? We can see that career websites actually exchange places with professional networks. So this is really good news, because that means you have the power to control what is authentic, because you have control over the most credible source of information in the candidate's eyes. And all of this tends to beg the question, okay, isn't there some overlap happening on all these networks we're mentioning? So for instance, Indeed is a job board, but also has review capabilities now. Glassdoor is a review platform, but view themselves as the fastest growing job board. And then there's LinkedIn, which is a professional network, but also functions as a job board. And I think it's safe to say that employers can't ignore any of these platforms anymore, but must remember that candidates are using each of them differently. So specifically for reviews, where are candidates looking? Our research shows us that candidates are looking at reviews wherever they are available. So do not be surprised that 63% are looking at the reviews when they're searching for jobs on Indeed. And closely behind, we find networks like Glassdoor. So there's very tough competition here, because in the US, we're also seeing most companies actively present on Glassdoor. And on these platforms, candidates are distinctly interested in reading the written portion of the reviews. I'm sure there's no surprise there. But with a steady rise in candidates going to these review platforms, this is where employers can choose to take control of the narrative by responding to these reviews, both positive and negative. But our research indicates that responding to negative reviews is perceived as more important. Now, keep in mind that 47% of candidates actually find these reviews to be credible or trustworthy. So it means we can't disregard these reviews. And when we ask if the reviews help them to inform their decision-making process, the answer is very clear. 79% of candidates feel that reviews impact their decision to work for a company or not. I'm going to repeat that because that's massive. 79, almost 80% of candidates feel that reviews impact their decision to work for a company or not. So even if candidates don't believe in the credibility of the reviews, it can still prevent them from applying. And with candidates doubting the authenticity of reviews, the company's response can override this response to keep them moving towards submitting an application. So other than owning how the company responds to reviews, what other ways can companies project authenticity? We're going to hear a little bit more on this from Miki shortly, but one of the best tools in your tool belt is employee advocacy. Such a buzzword this year. I've heard it from so many companies that this is a strategic initiative. And when it comes to candidates visiting your career website, they know that it's curated content, but they're also craving that unofficial, uncensored view. And it's leading them to review platforms like we just talked about. So at this point, your employees can actually become your best influencers and a strong driver for your employer brand. When employees advocate for your company, it not only expands your organic reach and reduces the amount of paid presence that you have to invest in, but it also provides some positive reinforcement for those employees that are taking part. This is precisely why we've seen this become a key focus in 2020 for many employer branding teams. But just remember that if you sow in the seeds of authenticity, using these great employee testimonials and different advocacy platforms, then you will reap the benefits of having a deeper trust from candidates. Now, let's pause for a minute and let's imagine that we're spending a day outdoors. So I know everyone's locked in their homes, so this is a good exercise for all of us. But imagine you're spending a day outdoors, enjoying nature. Perhaps you're hiking or relaxing in your happy place. I see myself on a hammock in the backyard. And so it's a bit chilly outside. So I think now is probably a good time to make this reference. But it's a bit chilly. We're at the end of winter. And then you feel this warm breeze, just a soft, warm breeze, letting you know that spring is finally coming. And it strikes this perfect balance of comfort. So you have the cool air and this warm wind. It's amazing. I'm fully in my happy place now. But think of AI as the cool air of increasing digitalization in recruitment. So think of this cool air as things like chatbots, virtual interviews, just all forms of automation. And then you can begin to feel the warm breeze of human interaction. And it's what strikes this comfortable balance. And this balance is likely to ebb and flow over the years. We see it all the time in our research. And that is why it is critically important to measure and refine your strategy by the year to make sure you're reaching this ideal balance between the digitalization and the human elements. And candidates are realizing more and more, whether they like it or not, that work is a big part of life. And they want to know more of everyday life in a company. They want to know how employees spend their day at the office. They want to know what employees do for fun, what relationships are like between different colleagues, potential activities, assignments. They want to feel the experience of working for a company and put themselves in the shoes of those who have already worked there. But how else do candidates look for that warmth of human interaction? More candidates than ever are seeking information about events where they can meet employers. And this is especially true on top social media channels, where it ranks as among the 3 most important features for 2020. Of course, it does involve a lot of resources to maintain a campus presence, and perhaps that's why we've seen a reduction in the amount of companies sharing information about upcoming events on social media. But remember, well over 40% of candidates in the USA are looking for information about potential employers on campus. So now we've seen this warm wind, how this warm wind of human interaction is craved by the candidates. But as HR tech tools have made the recruitment process much more efficient, the atmosphere is filled with this cool air of digitalization. However, when it comes to candidates, they have very clear preferences on which parts of the recruitment process should not be automated, or at least not yet. In fact, we've seen that less than 17% of candidates are open to being assessed by a robot during an interview. The key word here is being assessed. We find it's a discomfort when candidates are being assessed by an AI. But particularly when it comes to being guided by a chatbot, for instance, candidates tend to be more open. and particularly when it comes to interview scheduling, application process guidance, and searching for information, as we can see here. And dare we say this is likely to rise in the coming years as technology continues to develop. In 2020, the majority of candidates have not yet interacted with a chatbot on a career website, and that's mostly due to only a small percentage of companies having implemented them at this point. In the US, we're seeing only 17% of companies actually using a chatbot feature at the start of this year. But when exploring a company's career website, candidates oftentimes find themselves lost, and they're overwhelmed by the amount of information and struggle to find the right information for their personal profile. And we see this with a large portion of candidates are now placing responsibility on your career website to help them find their fit at your company. So once again, a proper guidance is needed, and one strong solution to this issue is career matchers. So as we can see here, using career matchers, using a career matching tool that stresses a candidate's background, qualification, or interest as the way that it's organized is the current preference. But candidates continue to show us that they are very open to different solutions and willing to embrace this kind of a tool on a career website. You can see there's many different ways to implement this sort of a tool, and the current preference is based on background, qualification, and interests. So using tools like a career matcher are a great way to help candidates not to get lost, help them to navigate the information that's most relevant for them. And it also prevents candidates from getting frustrated. And this is one of the things at Potentialpark that we spend a lot of time focusing on, because we have direct insights about what is causing candidates to get frustrated. What is making them drop out of your recruitment funnel? And over the years, there have been two key presiding themes. The first is clarity, and the second is time. Candidates want more information about the process. They want to know how long it will take to hear back from you. And as we can see, candidates are expressing this directly in our research. You can see some of the quotes that they've shared with us. In fact, 47% of candidates in the US have waited over a month to get a reply after applying. So that's almost half of candidates that have had to wait over a month just to hear back about an application they submitted. And I know that it's difficult to get those quick replies out, but it's completely possible to reply to candidates within a month's time to at least give them some indication of what's happening in the process. And in order to light the way and activate them, a smooth candidate experience is crucial. So even though there is no one-size-fits-all strategy, because different candidates have different experiences in their application process, it's important to make sure that a smooth experience is happening. So 57% of candidates are looking for content other than just open positions. So that means that 57% of candidates are interested in looking at your culture, your benefits, your work-life balance, and they want to know what a typical day is like and who you're looking for. But recalling that most candidates think that career websites need to improve at helping them find their fit within a company, adaptive content is a great way to provide a more personalized experience and increase your activation of the candidates. Another way to activate comes through professional networks. So most candidates are pretty used to sharing their LinkedIn profiles at this point, but more so, candidates are feeling that it adds value to their application. So it's a bit different than what we're seeing with social media profiles. And this, in combination with the growing popularity of applying without user accounts, creates a clear need for a seamless experience from job search to application, and both on desktop and mobile, which brings me to my next point. In 2020, it's safe to say that a mobile experience is absolutely crucial in order to activate talent and continue getting them to apply. So already 66% of candidates in the US are using their smartphone for career-related activities. And most of them are searching for jobs or visiting the company career websites. And in fact, 44% are even completing their applications on their smartphone at this point. On a global scale, we're even seeing that 1 out of every 2 candidates have applied for a job using their smartphone before. And the good news is that after a decade of mobile-friendly developments, companies seem to be the shining lights at the end of the funnel, the recruitment funnel, that is. And almost all company career websites in the US are now mobile-friendly. So well done. But we would not be Potentialpark if we wouldn't say there is still work to do. While career websites themselves are mobile-friendly, 1 out of every 20 job searches, job ads, and application forms are not mobile-friendly. 1 out of every 20. So if candidates have made it this far in their mobile journey, do not let them down on the last leg. So let's try to get that to 100%, so the whole process is mobile-friendly. So knowing what we know now about the key elements at play in our big world of talent communication, I encourage you, no, even better, I challenge you to actively dig deeper into the data and analytics. Drink deeply of that water because it's going to bring life to your campaigns and all your efforts. And don't be afraid to be authentic, because remember that trust grows from authenticity. While many of us have been very excited about the winds of change that AI and robots represent, knowing that this is going to help us with our everyday tasks, we can't forget that candidates are human. They want to get to know us and the other amazing people that are working at our organizations. We can be the light at the end of this recruitment funnel with a smooth application process and clear next steps. So for goodness sake, the climate is changing, and so should we. Act now. Thank you guys so much for joining us for this knowledge session. And please stay tuned, because we actually have some amazing related topics that are coming up. If you have any questions about any of the data you heard, or you'd like to find out how this applies to your company, be sure to reach out to us at us@potentialpark.com. And at this point, I'm going to keep us rolling. Let's go ahead and hand it over to our CEO, Torgil, who is going to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Chelsea. I hope you guys can hear me now. And thank you, everyone, for having patience with us. We, as you all know, we were supposed to meet in New York last Tuesday, but due to the COVID-19, we decided to change it into a webinar with very short notice. So last week we tried the GoToWebinar tool, and today we're trying the Zoom tool. There are some hiccups in both, but I hope that the majority of Chelsea's knowledge session came through to all of you. I just wanted to there was a question here in the chat regarding where is this data from, and as Potentialpark is doing global research both in Asia, all across Europe, in Americas, and then also in the US. It's a good question, but everything that Chelsea was sharing, the key findings, the insights, and the numbers were all relevant only for the US. So it's about the US job seekers and the candidates, and employers actively communicating and recruiting in the US. So this is the perspective that we're having today. But then, without much further ado, I wanted to introduce Miki Johnson, who comes from Job Portraits, and are going to talk to us about how to do authentic I'm so curious. Over to you, Miki.
Thanks so much, Torgil, and Chelsea. So what I would actually love to start off with before I even get into the deck or anything is I know we were all originally going to be in person, and you know, one of the things that's great about being in person with a bunch of other smart, interesting people in our industry is we get to learn a little bit about who each other is. So if all of you could just really quickly into the chat window, and I know you'll see like a little chat icon at the bottom of your screen, and you just click that and the chat window pops up on the side. But if everyone could just like share where you are currently, like in the world geographically, and then your role, because I'm just really curious kind of also who's in the room with us. So if we could take just like a minute for everybody to chat in your response, that would be really great. And I feel like it'll feel like then we all kind of know a little more about who's here with us. I know right now it just says like 33 participants. It's like, what does that mean? So thank you. Cool. We got 2 from New Jersey. By the way, I'm in Pacifica, California. So just outside of San Francisco in the Bay Area, which is where our company is based. Awesome. Lithuania, Stockholm, New York, Massachusetts. Cool. So lots of head of comms, head of TA, employer branding people, of course. Sweden, more from Stockholm, Austria. Cool. Well, this is great. I think one of the exciting things about getting to make this online is that I think we got a lot more representation from all over the place than we would have. Cool, that's great. Well, thank you guys so much for that, and please continue to chat in, and especially if you have questions as I'm going along, I'm really happy to stop and share at any point. So let me just share my screen real quick and get this going. Cool. And I hope like Torgil or Chelsea, like please jump in if there's questions, because I actually realized I can't see chat when I'm presenting. So, let's see. So first off, I just wanted to say a little bit about Job Portraits. I'm one of the co-founders. I actually started the company with my husband about 6 years ago, and we are an employer branding content studio. We work primarily with high growth startups, but also some Fortune 500 companies and employer brand leads at bigger companies and stuff like that. And so as I was thinking about topics for this presentation today, obviously authenticity has been a big topic, I think, throughout, as we've heard the presentations from Potentialpark and the research that they've been doing. And I think that that's this word that gets thrown around a lot. It's like, be authentic. And it's sort of like, yeah, but like, how do you do that, right? Like, especially if you're a huge organization and you have like tons of different teams, like what does authentic mean to different people? How do you really like make that come alive in content and strategy and all that kind of stuff? And so one of the interesting things about Job Portraits is that most of us actually come from journalism rather than like a marketing or agency background. And so we essentially have sort of like a little newsroom that just produces candidate and employee focused content. And so because of our journalism background, I think we skew towards authentic and sort of brutal honesty more than maybe most people, because we have always come from this assumption that like content should help people make important decisions, and therefore like we have to give them the best information. And so we do this a lot in the content that we produce. We really push our clients to do some of the things I'm going to talk about here, talk about challenges, like be really honest. So I thought like there was some ways I could give you guys some really tactical insights into how we do authentic and how we help our clients do that. These are a couple of ways that you can do that. So highlighting challenges, I think, is a big one. Making it clear you're actually not for everyone is really important. Admitting that you don't know everything, and then letting your employees speak for themselves, which obviously we've already heard, I think people are excited about and interested in. But I also know that some of these can sound kind of risky, right? Like talking about things that aren't talking about things that are hard, or even letting employees kind of speak for themselves, stuff like that. I know that it's not like the first thing you necessarily think of always, but what I'm hoping that I can convince you today is that not doing them is actually much more risky. And one of the big reasons is because if you think about, if you've ever heard the idea that like if someone has a bad experience at a restaurant, or if someone has a good experience at a restaurant, they'll tell like one other person. If they have a bad experience, they'll tell 10 other people, right? And so if you think about if you're creating a bad candidate experience for people that are maybe not a fit for your company, right? Like if you're bringing in a whole bunch of people and you're not making it really clear, like who is going to really do well in the interview process, who's going to do well at the company, then you get a lot of people who get excited and they come in and then they get rejected, or worse of all, they come in and then they end up not staying. So if you're not making it really clear who you are and aren't for, you actually risk this like a lot more sort of bad candidate experiences, and those can have a really detrimental effect on your brand. And I just want to give a shout out to a new book that's on the market called The Give and the Get by Brian Adams and Charlotte Marshall. I have a small excerpt in it too, but they really outline this idea very clearly, and I think it's like a really smart idea. But one of the beautiful things about being really honest about challenges at your company is that it also actually makes the true things more believable. There's just a funny thing that happens in our brain, which is like, if I tell you 3 amazing things about my company, your skeptical brain is immediately going to go like, yeah, but like, probably not, right? Like, probably there's something else that you're not telling me. But if I tell you 3 amazing things and then I go, and here's something that's actually kind of challenging and not everyone loves, then it's sort of satisfied that part of my brain. And I go, oh, okay, cool. Like, I believe you now. So again, I think this authentic thing is really important. And so we're going to get into how to actually do that. So highlighting challenges. One thing you can do is to start with internal stories. What I mean by this is you can start by surfacing stories by telling people that you're going to keep them internal, right? So sometimes people are scared to share challenging things that are going on if they know it's going to go, be sort of public. But if you start, by saying, hey, I just really want to understand what's going on here and what the real story is, and I'm not going to share anything. And then if something becomes an interesting story and you're comfortable with it, like maybe we would share it eventually with candidates, but to try and, really build trust with people that way, because I think the important thing is just to figure out like what is really the story to start with. Another thing we like to do is to ask, where do hard and satisfying overlap, right? Because I think when we say you should talk about challenges, people get worried that you're going to get just like complaints and it's going to turn into people just being like, I don't like this and I don't like, like whatever. So if you instead ask people like, where in your job are things really hard, but also really satisfying, right? So when you solve the challenge, like when does that feel good? I think that'll give you a good idea of challenges. And then, like I said, like what's possible if you solve a problem, right? So if you start with talking about solving a problem, then you can sort of back into the challenge that created it in the first place. And people are usually going to be more comfortable talking about something that they feel like is kind of resolved a little bit. So as far as making it clear that you're not for everyone, I think this is like maybe the thing that is the hardest for people to swallow, is that your employer brand should not be like, we're so amazing, everyone come apply. Your employer brand should actually be like a smart filter that gets the right people to come in, but actually the wrong people to just self-select out, and your recruiting team like never has to deal with them. So I want to take just a sec to step out and help you think about like how to make the case for this. If you haven't, if this isn't something you're already like, gung-ho about at your company. But basically like just a really quick thought experiment. If you want to get 5 qualified applicants, would you rather talk to 100 applicants where 5 of them are qualified? Or would you rather talk to 25 applicants where 20 of them are qualified, right? And I think it's pretty clear that you would rather do the second one, just thinking about time and resources for your recruiting team, for your interview teams. Again, those extra applicants that are going to be rejected and like you risk having a bad experience from. So really thinking about like how can your employer brand be a smart filter rather than a magnet, is really what I think it's important to get people to start to think about. So ways to make it clear that you're not necessarily for everyone. Dig into misconceptions. This is one of our favorite questions for like recruiters or interview teams is like, what's a common misconception that you hear about our company that you're like constantly having to sort of reset expectations. For us, actually, a lot of startups, like it's actually like the size of the company, right? And what that means, or you're now a public company and that means that I'm going to get to rest on my laurels, right? But that's not actually what you want people to think coming in, because that's not the situation. So I think that's like a great question. What do successful employees never do? It's easy to go in and say what makes us special and what do you love about being here? And honestly, you're going to get a bunch of really general stuff that everyone says, like everyone's really nice, it's a family, whatever. But if you ask this question, you're much more likely to get the clear things that you need to like select out for. And if you figure out the things people never do, then you can actually construct content around like sort of the opposite of that, or like you can talk about who is going to succeed by sort of making sure that you're avoiding like who doesn't succeed, right? And then examining exit interviews is also a really great way to figure out like what are some good stories about how do we talk about like what's hard and what makes people leave. And this is really important because losing talent that you don't want to lose is a huge problem, obviously. So if you can figure out like why are people what expectations did we set incorrectly in the beginning, and could we create content that would actually help avoid those so that those people self-select out way earlier in the process, and the people that are left are the people that are going to stay and provide value right to our business for the long term. Admit you don't know everything. This is also, I know, can be sort of a challenging thing for some people. But first off, I think focusing on learnings. So it's not about going out and being like, we don't know how to do this thing, right? But if you focus on something you're still learning or something you learned in the past, then it shows. And the big one about this is that it's showing humility, right? And what we hear from candidates, because we do some of our own candidate research too, and what we hear is that like people just know that work is not amazing all the time, right? They know that hard things happen, and what they really are interested in is like, what happens when things get hard, or I struggle, or there's a miscommunication with me and my manager or something. So admitting that you're constantly trying to improve and change and like listen to people's feedback is going to go a really long way with candidates. So focusing on learnings. Again, talking about past challenges, like people are often more comfortable talking about things that happened previously and were hard rather than like things that are hard right now. Ask for opinions and advice. So even if you like create a piece of content, even like, a nice little social media post or something like that, and you end it by saying, we'd love to hear what you think, right? So just really showing that you're a place that values other people's input and that gives you a chance to engage with candidates and stuff like that. And then sharing how individuals have grown. This is something we do a ton of, and you kind of can't create better content than this, I think. But really just sitting down with people, team members, and talking about what they've learned on their personal journey at the company. So you're showing career trajectory, You're showing, the kind of interesting people you're going to get to work with, but you're also subtly telling people like, this is a place where we're interested in people learning and growing. You're not just coming in and immediately expected to know everything. And we also, don't think that we know everything. So finally, let the employees speak for themselves. It sounds like this is something that everyone is already pretty excited about. And I know that it can feel overwhelming of like, how do we do that? So also, I really don't know why my thing is putting up like the first two at the same time instead of the first one. I obviously got my transitions wrong, but anyway. Company hashtag, as Chelsea already said, is like a great thing just because they're already talking about you, frankly, out there. So like give them a way to make it centralized and make it easier for candidates to find. A Slack channel or, whatever your chat internally is, but set up some kind of channel or even like an email address where people can share stories and actually give them regular prompts on a topic. We've done this for clients where we set up like a monthly topic that we ask for stories for, and then you can actually take those stories in and curate them and put them back out on your channels if you're not comfortable just sort of letting people speak for themselves. 90-day review reflection, or 30 or 60, whatever. But a lot of times these are already happening, right? So if you have new employees that are coming in and they're being asked to do some kind of sort of self-reflection or review of their first however amount of time, that's amazing content. I mean, obviously you want to like check in with them and set that expectation and see if there are parts they'd be okay sharing, but using things that are already happening, right, to help create authentic content about what their experience is like at the company. And then asking for nominations. I think this is a really nice thing to do is you can say like around your values, you could say, please like nominate people from your team who you think really embody like this value this month. And then it becomes like a nice sort of, like whatever thing for them. And then you can do like some social posts or like a small blog post about them or something like that. And then providing speaker support. Just if your people are already going out and giving talks at conferences, make that easy for them, give them stipends, potentially give them help from creative teams to like make their presentations great, record the presentations, and then use those later. I think those are all really awesome things to do. I think the most important thing is like, this was a lot of content and there's a lot of things you could do in here. Choose like one or two of these things and start there and kind of build out and see if you can get people excited and comfortable and then move more in that direction of more and more authentic, sort of build out from there. Different companies are going to be comfortable starting with different things. So I think it's good to just kind of, like start small and work out from there. So I kind of raced through this because I wanted to have some time for questions. And I see that maybe a few have popped up. So
I have a question for you, which is that I think, authenticity, even though it's a very hard word to pronounce for a Swede, it's a very important word. And we have seen enormous success, as you have as well, when you dare to be and communicate in an authentic way. But sometimes you have to convince senior managers. What is the advice on slowly but surely having them to dare to let go of the control?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first off, this idea of like sort of starting with one or two small initiatives that you can almost run as like an experiment. So if you can get them to agree to like, hey, on like this one channel, for like 1 week, we're going to try, this thing and see what the response is, and then try to really measure and see, like, do you get more engagement? See if you can do a little bit of surveys afterwards and see, like, what did candidates think of that? Like, did they find it more helpful or more authentic? That kind of thing. The other thing is obviously to look at other companies that have really like best in class employer brands and sort of show how they're able to be authentic and how that's actually making them best in class and like helping what they're doing. And then I think if you can build you know, sort of a business case around that idea of, you know, if we could actually lower the number of applicants we get, but make the percentage that's qualified much higher, like what would that do to our cost and our efficiency and our cost to hire and the weight on our interview teams and all that kind of stuff. I know it's like a hard case to make, but I think there's really kind of a groundswell like towards that, of this idea of your employer brand being a smart filter rather than a magnet. And so I think you know, if you can take your internal numbers and sort of figure out like that thing, like if we only had to interview 25 candidates to get 5 instead of 100, like what would be the savings to the business if that could be true? That seems like a pretty strong case to me, and I think it has been for leaders that we've seen. And then authenticity is just like, it's the only way to do that, right? So I think hopefully that's helpful. Any other questions?
I think it's really good to have those type of measurements or KPIs and to prove everything that we do in any aspect of the talent communication and to communicate in an authentic way and get the team together with you in doing that is a really good road to success. You mentioned a book very briefly in the beginning. Maybe you want to repeat the name again, or even if you have a link, you can post it in the chat for the people that were interested in the book. It's always good to have a read-ups if people are going to be having home offices. It's good things to spend their time on in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, for sure. I will share it in the chat. It's called The Give and the Get. But yeah, I will share the link for sure.
Yeah. And if there are other questions for Miki and regarding of authentic communication or about job portraits, do reach out to her either here in the chat or directly. And I'm sure you have your LinkedIn profile ready as well if you want to connect with Miki. So please share that link too in the chat, Miki. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. And yeah, and yes, just to reiterate, like really, I'm really happy to chat with anybody or share resources anytime. I know we're all stuck inside and just sort of have weird extra time on our hands. So I'll share my information and like, please let me know if I can be helpful with anything.
Yeah, and I just think that Miki and everyone that joined us in the last session, together with KPMG and L'Oreal, that were our original hosts for the Talent Communication Summit at KPMG, and then we were intending to have a future forum at L'Oreal, but due to the corona, we have all been exposed to new situations, and I really appreciate and thank all our speakers and participants for being flexible. And I think we will all remember these days for the rest of our working lives, that how strange it was during the corona times, and pulling together like this is really important. So next part is actually to have a little bit of a discussion regarding the how to implement and how to work with talent communication, together with Katherine Cuevas from L'Oreal, and then also Ali from Continental. So we were also supposed to be 3 people in this panel, but Antonio from Comcast mailed us this morning and said that all of his team has been required to help out reorganizing the workforce to see how they can handle the COVID-19 situation. So he sends his regards and hopes that he can be with us for next time instead. But we just learned from Miki here that in order to be authentic and trustworthy, you should always say 3 great things about your as an employer, but then also one thing that's a little bit challenging. And maybe that's a good introduction to see if you could just say a few things about your own background, and then the 3 great things plus 1 challenging about your company as an employer.
Sure, who would you like to start?
Yeah, Kathy, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. I know, I feel like with a panel discussion, we have to either, step on each other's toes, or it's like, hey, Kathy, talk. So to introduce myself, Kathy Cuevas, I lead university relations and employer branding for L'Oreal USA. So my job is around collaborating with corporate communications, both globally and locally, on how we communicate our employer brand in person, online, etc. And then the other half of my job is university relations. So my team goes out across the USA, recruits talent from universities at the undergraduate and graduate level, and runs our summer internship program. So very interesting times given COVID-19, for us at L'Oreal. But to think about, I guess, sort of the challenge of our brand from an employer perspective is the perception, particularly with consumer brands, of things being gendered. So if you think about perceptions of Heineken at a career fair, you'll see long lines primarily of men there. When people think of L'Oreal, the first place they go to is beauty and cosmetics. And so right next door, you'll see a long line of women. So I think one of our challenges is to break some of those misconceptions, right? About, our values, about the ways of working, about diversity and inclusion. So we've been on this road for quite some time, but I think it's always a challenge being a consumer brand and having the population have a perception of that brand. How do you break out of that and change that from a perspective of the employer brand? So that's one of the challenges. From a perspective of some of the great things, which we're trying to demystify around that challenge, it is that sense of entrepreneurship, opportunity, the growth and development, the fact that we have 36 different brands sold in the US and thousands of different products within those brands offers the opportunity for diverse career paths. So our career paths, we talk about our career paths not as a ladder, but as sort of the web, the networked web, that you can create your own career here with us. So, that sense of exploration, entrepreneurship, career growth and development, those are some of the key attributes and values of our company, and some things that make our employer brand great.
Good. Thank you. And I think you have a very interesting case where you as you point out, you have a super strong consumer brand, which then reflects into the employer brand, but you want to do so much more and recruit different types of talents as well, not the ones that are pre-designated to come and join you. So that's very, very interesting. Then, Ali, what about you and about Continental? Let us know.
Yeah, so I'm Ali Brown, and I lead employer branding for the US and Canada at Continental, or Continental in Europe. And you may have heard of Continental as a tire company, but similar to L'Oreal, we have that misconception as well. We're a large global company with over 240,000 employees with several different business areas. So we have a huge automotive division where we're working on different technologies like autonomous driving and connectivity, and we're also doing some service type technologies as well. And we also do different products that support industrial mobility. So, what I think is really great about working at Continental is that, you do have so many different opportunities within the organization and different career paths. We have so many stories of people who've moved around throughout the organization and several different locations as well. We're really big on international mobility. And we've also really built a good strategic foundation for our EVP. And it's based on our core values, and all of the messaging, you know, really holds true now that we've started digging up these employee stories. You see that, and it's because we took the time to really do the research and create this basis for our employer brand. So I think challenges, we have a lot of challenges right now. Not only the coronavirus, but also, you know, the big impact on the automotive industry. You know, several plants are stopping production currently. So what does that do when you're an automotive supplier? So it will be challenging, but I think if we have attracted the right people who like to work in that challenging environment, which we try to communicate that through our EVP. Miki was talking about earlier, the Give and the Get book. So, you know, communicating that it's not easy work that we're doing, that sometimes it is hard, and being upfront with that, I think, will help get through the challenging times.
Yeah. No, it's certainly is challenging times, and a little bit funny, you know, everybody in this field, we are online talent communicators, and therefore we have actually been using modern tools for years in order to communicate. So in a weird way, maybe there are other parts of our companies that can maybe learn from us and our skill sets. So maybe you, as Julian pointed out last Tuesday, that the skill set that is rewarded now will be those of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial mindset, pushing forward with the skills and the communication we have. But we also heard yesterday that some companies are actually stopping all of their communication right now with regards to employment because of the COVID-19. Others say that no, we need to push forward and support our communities and keep hiring. What is the stand that your companies are taking right now in the COVID-19 situation?
So from a L'Oreal perspective, we're definitely still hiring. You can look on our website, there are jobs posted. You know, for now, you know, we are looking at plan A, plan B for the internship. You know, we've heard some companies are beginning to cancel their internships. We're absolutely not looking at that as an option at this point. We're really looking for the plan A in person, plan B, how do you enable an employee population for virtual engagement, and how would we do that for the first time with you know, a set of interns? So we're really taking a page out of the playbook of our HR generalists who are really working with our employees across the organization, looking at the best practices for not only social distancing and manufacturing facilities and our laboratories, but you know, how can we better leverage technology to be fully engaged as employees, you know, work from home. So, you know, I think, you know, I'm very grateful to the organization for, you know, enablement, empowerment of the employees through this time. And we're looking to do the same with our interns and new hires. So for example, our new hire orientation has gone virtual. So we are still hiring, we're still bringing new people, new experienced professionals to the organization. It's just in a very different way. And I think we all have to embrace the new normal, and our candidates and new hires are doing the same.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's the same for us right now. It's the same for us right now at Continental. We're still hiring, but we've moved all of our interviews to virtual interviews for all positions. And we're lucky that our talent acquisition team just launched a video interviewing platform last month. So the timing for that worked out well. And then we're also in the process of trying to move all of those trainings and onboarding sessions to virtual. So there aren't really any plans yet to halt hiring or start dates, and we're just trying to keep it, live by the moment and keep moving. So
yeah, no, very good. Thank you for sharing. I think things are changing now, not only week by week, almost day by day, and to have that open, creative, innovative mindset and do the best we can with the situation we have, it's going to help ourselves and help everyone else to pull through this. In Chelsea's presentation, she talked a little bit about with the balance between AI and humans, and in one strange way, people want the quality that can be delivered by an AI supported tool, but they're also a little bit uncomfortable once they know that it's not the human behind it, but there's a computer, an AI tool. What are your reasoning around this, and how much computer aided or AI? AI is a very wide concept, and people sometimes use it more often than they actually have AI. But what is how are you rushing into it, or you're backing into it? Ali, you want to start this time?
Yeah, I can start off this time. So I agree, Torgil. A lot of times you hear at these conferences, everyone's talking about AI and all this technology. But when you really look to what most companies are doing, they're just kind of scratching the surface with chatbots, which aren't always necessarily AI. I think it's important to have a solid communication and candidate experience first before really implementing new technologies. It's easy to get excited and want to do all of these different technologies, but if you don't have the right framework in place, then it's not going to really succeed and deliver the right message that you're trying to deliver. We are streamlining the candidate journey with things like auto scheduling. So that's one area that we've started. And I think we'll try to slowly introduce some more technology and different things into our process, but we still have a lot of other areas to improve on first. And I think that's okay too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I definitely echo that. The cautiously optimistic approach. With AI, I feel like it's the next buzzword. 5 years ago, everybody was using innovation so much that it lost its meaning. We're now in that AI. Everything is AI, augmented reality, virtual reality. But from a from our perspective and my perspective, we've been rolling out chatbots role by role, and making sure that we're thinking through the use of some of these machine learning tools, less around assessment and more about the communication. And I think Chelsea said it well around that, and the appetite for candidates and interacting with the robot. When I think about this, I don't know if anyone are fans of Westworld out there, but there was a scene in the season premiere of Westworld where one of the characters was interacting with a recruiter on the phone. And towards the end of the call, he asked a question about, well, can I fit better in this organization? And there was silence at the other end. And he said, am I speaking with a human? And I think that was really, sort of echo and sort of our approach on this, that if, when we roll these things out, we need to be transparent, that you are speaking, with a chatbot, with a robot. This is this is an AI, this is a machine learning. We have to have that transparency with our candidates about at what point they can connect with a human, how to make those connections, and be transparent and not disguise, a chatbot as a virtual recruiter. It is a chatbot, so that we're being transparent about how we're implementing these technologies and engaging with candidates.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to think about, you know, your audience, who is on the receiving end of it. I've seen a lot of companies maybe start with students, or maybe like different technology groups first, who might be a little bit more comfortable with the AI.
Yeah, and of course sometimes there are some quality hiccups with the AI, but also you can get even better quality with the AI, especially in the beginning of the recruiting process, with some of the most commonly raised questions and concerns that candidates have. So it's definitely a tool, and it's not about avoiding it, but how to be open, transparent, and implementing it. I am also, if there anyone in the audience that would like to ask any questions, please feel free to use the chat bot, and we'll see if we can handle this basic technology, which is not AI, to see if there are any other questions that you would like to have answered. But I will also try another piece of the technology, and that's actually to share my screen here a little bit, because we have something that we have as a mental framework, which is a talent communication funnel from, of course, the old marketing model, but it takes you down from the raising the awareness of the candidates into the interest and the consideration into the actual application. And I was just curious on Kathy's and Alice's point of view here, because you can't just focus on one of these. You have to get the whole funnel working for you. But which part do you find to be the most challenging right now to work on?
For me, it's really around the consideration piece. You know, we've been, and I think that's partially because as a global company, we are, you know, really trying to strike the balance between sharing information, you know, around what we share across markets versus what is unique to each market. So in that consideration perspective, that's where those the personalization can come in, the unique content, the career matchers. So it's striking that right balance in the personalization and the engagement of the candidate as an individual in that consideration area. You know, as the U.S. market versus our group, you know, is where we're, you know, we're paying the most attention to at this point.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear from the audience as well in the chat, what you think is the most challenging funnel stage for you. But I would think probably a lot of people would say either the top or the bottom of the funnel are often challenging, both in employer branding and marketing. You know, at the top of the funnel, you really have to have a unique message to initially attract them. And I think for us, that's probably the biggest challenge, is at the top of the funnel. So getting the right message to the right audience. And then the middle of the funnel, we've done a pretty good job of, you know, telling that authentic story of our culture. And as long as you have that culture, telling those stories should be, you know, come a little easier. With the top of the funnel, we've tried some different marketing techniques. Like we recently did a white paper campaign that we tried some lead generation to fill our talent community, our talent CRM. So we use the same kind of marketing approach there, and, you know, are trying different things to see, and then, you know, set up a almost like a lead, what you would call in marketing a lead nurture campaign, where they received a series of emails afterwards, you know, sharing some blog stories, videos, and then the ask to apply at the end.
Yeah. Do you have metrics for that, or how do you learn forward when you we are all experimenting with new ways of communicating, and in which way are you following up with these lead metrics?
Yeah, so we're still running the campaign, so we haven't had the full metrics from it yet. But the exciting thing is that running a campaign like that, we will be able to track where that candidate goes from start to finish. So if the candidate does become a hire, we'll be able to track that it was exactly from that campaign, which I know sometimes it can be really hard since there's so many points of influence with a candidate, what to track, what the exact thing was that converted them. So
yeah, so we got a question here also from the audience, saying that the biggest challenges are all of the different interview stages, but then also taking it on to the onboarding process. What are your advice here and insight how to, it's a little bit the continuation of this funnel, going beyond the application into the hiring and the onboarding?
So, one of the things that is critically important, to us is the candidate experience. So in the funnel, until they apply, they're that potential candidate. Then there's this conversion to candidate, and we really have to think through, that bottom of the funnel, which is that true CX, the candidate experience. So, I hear you as far as interviewing and onboarding. That usually that's a shared accountability. So you have your talent acquisition professionals, but then you have your shared accountability with the business on interviewing, and then with onboarding, I'm sure there are shared accountabilities there. So, for us, it's really important to have that internal alignment and agreement up front. Limit the amounts of interviews, to the critical key stakeholders, because, I remember when I first started here, people used to go to 7, 8 rounds of interviews, and is that really, is that necessary? Are these the critical key stakeholders? Are some of those interviews maybe just more, touch points to more, engage the candidate with the culture, or help them learn more about the role as opposed to assessment? So that internal alignment is so critical to having a really thorough end-to-end successful candidate experience. So I understand your frustrations and maybe challenges in that front, but that's how we're tackling.
Kathy, do you have it as easy to get people to join you in your campus tour as it is for them to sign up to 7 rows of interviews, or which is the easiest way?
Well, we don't do the 7 interviews today.
All right, good.
That was our starting point. Now we sort of have this approach of 3, 2, 1, trying to limit the candidate interviews, as I mentioned, to who are those key stakeholders and decision makers. But when it comes to the campus events, it's interesting. So, from a volume perspective, we're again, pretty easy from a volume perspective to get the crowds. It's the D&I, the diversity and inclusion perspective that I mentioned about the perceptions of our brand, right? So, I think that's where we've made a lot of progress in the past 4 years on having more diverse engagements, meaning that we're not only doing the outreach, but diverse candidates are looking for us, right? So there's been that change in the past 4 years where we are attracting the people organically to our sessions, so we don't have to. It's not so much of a pull strategy. They're actively seeking us out. But that takes time and targeted energy to make sure that when you do have engagements on campus, that you do have a diverse population to talk to and to engage, and that you create an environment in person that really reflects your culture and feels inclusive.
Yeah. Very good. I think this is the complexity of modern talent communication, whether it's on campus, on Instagram, or trying to get them through the funnel all the way down. We're just about wrapping up our little talk. But before we end, I want to see if there are any other questions in the chat. But also wondering, as we now move forward, and hopefully we will see each other soon live. But until then, what are the key initiatives that you are working on that we can follow you and see and learn for next year? What are the things that we can maybe anticipate from you?
Sure. So for us, I joined the company 2 years ago, and that was when really in the markets we started focusing on employer brand and activating it, and globally as well, created more of a global community around our employer brand. And so the first 2 years we've been really focusing on our strategy and building up content and starting to campaign. And now in this year, we're focused most on employer advocacy, and we've developed a program that is supposed to launch next month. So now we're in discussions about how we do that. But, it's around, the approach is really around inspiring and equipping all of our advocates and ambassadors with the right communications, training, tools, and materials. So we produce some really great materials and tips and tools for everyone that will be exciting to share and see what comes out of it.
Yeah.
Yep, and along those lines, we're also looking at, we've been piloting some programs with an employee advocacy platform. So now we're going to be rolling that out more broadly across the various functions and divisions of our organization. And it's really exciting because, different stakeholders in the organization have different perspectives on, giving the keys to the kingdom to an employee, so to speak, when it comes to communication. Mm-hmm. So, that's that internal alignment that takes the longest when launching these types of initiatives. But we're really excited at the point that we've gotten to showcase that you can do it in a way that is authentic, that brings these voices and elevates these voices outside the organization in a way that still makes our corporate comm, feel okay about it. It is possible, folks. You can do it. So that's what we'll be looking forward to rolling out more broadly this year.
Yeah.
We've had the same experience. It takes a lot of meetings and discussions to get it through, but I think we're there. So.
Yeah, exactly. I think the buy-in is the most important, and also being able to communicate the advancements that you make in your recruitment and your talent communication. And that's also part of what we're hoping to do at Potentialpark, bringing everybody together and sharing some of these thoughts and ideas on how to get that buy-in. But thank you so much, Katherine and Ali, for having this discussion. And thank you, Stefan and others that have been asking questions in the chat. I think we answered most of them, and I saw Ali was actually also answering some of them directly into the chat. I would ask both Katherine and Ali to, if you like, post your LinkedIn links so that the communication and the networking can continue, even though we can't meet live. But please do so and connect with each other. So thank you both, and hope to see you live soon.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and then the next part of our agenda is with Chris Malin, that has had a variety of experiences in building employer brand, and I'm sure he's much better in introducing himself than I am. Chris, are you with us?
I am.
There you are. Good.
There
Welcome.
It's good to see you all.
It's
great to be here.
Very good. So we went around the room and said a little bit where we are and where we're located, and I think you're probably almost as far away as Miki is.
Yeah, I'm all the way out here in California, which is wonderful, although a little bit locked down right now. I think that's happening everywhere. I've had the good fortune of being located out here in San Jose in Silicon Valley for some time. So I came out here my job most recently has been working with Google, but I've spent really about 20 years doing marketing in what I'd consider pretty high stakes environments. So often leading and advising on marketing in places where people are just beginning to understand how marketing can make a change for a business. So that's been with companies from Apple to eBay and Google, also as an advisor, as a consultant years ago with Boston Consulting Group, and then building my own brand practice. So my most recent job was spending almost the last 5 years at Google building our global employment marketing capabilities. And so that informs a lot of what I wanted to, what I'm really honored to get to talk about today. So shall I dive right in?
Yes, please do.
All right, it's great to have everybody here. I know it's a hectic time, but let's just jump in. I will try to, if I can, let me make sure I can see the chat really fast, just in case anybody has something for me. There we go, chat. And now let me see if I can actually take that over here. Yeah, great. So let me jump in on, based on my experience, I wanted to run through the essentials of employment marketing. But first, I think it's critically important that we recognize how much employment marketing actually really matters. And there we go. Hold on, let me make sure this is clicking properly. There we go. So number one, especially in a time like right now, it's really high stakes. It's important to recognize that the work, pardon me, I'm having technical challenges here. So it's incredibly high stakes. So this is the kind of marketing that matters both for companies and for potential candidates in really important ways. First, for an ambitious business, as we've been all discussing, employment marketing, or talent really that comes in through employment marketing, that talent is really the single biggest constraint to growth we have today. It's not capital, it really is labor. And for the candidates, this is something that goes well beyond a simple transaction. It's not a purchase. It's not a one-time event, but actually it's a life decision. It's something where we're asking them to trade things they can't diversify, time and reputation. So at that intersection between high stakes for the company and high stakes for the individual, that makes employment marketing pretty exciting. Second is greater diversity. We all live in a time where we recognize the benefits that come from a broad array of perspectives sitting around the table with us and helping us invent the future in our businesses. The marketing we do helps us find people who can dramatically support those efforts. And it helps us balance the tendency that any company has to find more people who already look just like us. This marketing allows people to come to us. It draws people in rather than us having to figure out how to go out. And finally, as we all know, we're in a time of rapid change. Originally, all I wanted to talk about was the fact that we can't even agree on what to call this field. You hear employer brand, you hear talent branding, you hear recruitment marketing, you hear a number of things, but I've landed on employment marketing largely because it captures the essence of three key marketing fields. One is brand marketing, the other is product marketing, think about our jobs as a product, and the last is growth marketing, where we do all of that talent attraction. And of course, in our current environment, with a lot of economic uncertainty, I would argue that employment marketing matters more than ever. because we're going to have people getting displaced. We're going to have different companies needing different things at a very rapid pace. Imagine the announcement that Amazon had that they need to hire 100,000 people for warehouse and supply chain. So this is not the change of pace the rate of change rather, will not slow down. With that in mind, let's just go right into the 5 essentials. So, and then we'll dive deeper. So you can read this, but it's clarify what we're really going to deliver to the business, know what we're selling, that gets into those products, decide who we intend to attract and hire, and intent's a big word here. Make sure they can see themselves in every touch point we have, and then finally reach them where they are. So jumping right in, what we're going to deliver. Let's go right into the metrics. Well, what does the business actually want from our hiring process? Well, hires, right? Pretty obviously. But there's problems with this as a metric for employment marketing. Now, the problem really comes from the fact that, one, there are a lot of variables after an application occurs that happen, that can obscure our understanding of whether our marketing worked or not. For instance, whether somebody does well or not in an interview, whether somebody has a good day or bad day. All those kinds of things make it a lot more difficult. And second, that time to hire, which can be 30, 60, 90 days, depends on the business, depends on the role. That time to hire from application all the way to offer acceptance can make it very difficult for us to tune any of our marketing efforts, especially the high-speed, fast-moving digital marketing that a lot of us do. So if hires doesn't work, then what do we need? Maybe it's applications? Well, applications are great because they do get to the end of the marketing funnel, right? The last step somebody takes from our attraction marketing anyway is they click apply and they complete that application. That final step is great, but there's a problem with that too, because if we get too many of the wrong people applying, we get too many of the wrong applications, then we're going to overwhelm our screening partners. We're going to cause problems for the business. And in fact, we could hit all of our metrics, but still harm the business. So with that in mind, I'd propose that relevant applications is really the right metric we're looking for. Now, what are those? Those are applications that we receive as a result of our marketing efforts, and that resume screeners, our screening team, selects and agrees to move forward in the process. Now, where does this come from? This comes from business-to-business marketing and sales and marketing partnerships, where there's a concept of a sales qualified lead and a marketing qualified lead. A marketing qualified lead here in this case is like an application, and by seeing that application, we can tell, does our marketing funnel work? A sales qualified lead is where the sales team, somebody who is not us, says, yes, you know what, these are relevant to us and we can carry them forward. So that tells us, does that functioning marketing funnel actually bring the right leads for our business? Make sense? So with that as a gold standard, it lets us see, again, efficiencies in the funnel. It lets our stakeholders, our partners, really judge our outcome to make sure that we're solving for the business, not just for marketing metrics. And third, it can still be measured fast enough because the lag time on screening is pretty short. It can be measured fast enough to allow us to make marketing adjustments. So second, as I said, we want to know what we're selling. This seems pretty straightforward, and it really covers two particular things: category and value proposition. So diving into category, a lot of people don't think about category too carefully in employment marketing, and this is worth a quick, just a quick dive into. Category here is the frame of reference that we want a potential candidate to consider when they encounter our employer brand, our company, our jobs. So let me give you a quick example of category or frame of reference. So when you think of Audi or BMW, do you think luxury car or practical car? If you were shopping for a luxury car, would you think Audi or would you think Honda or Toyota? Is Starbucks, is that competing in the coffee category? Is that in the diner category? Or maybe are they an alternative to an office? There's different ways to think about it. And since this was originally scheduled for New York, I also had a quintessential New York example. Should a New York bagel be framed as a bakery item, a breakfast option, or is it some unique category? New York bagel is a thing all its own. So this category helps us frame the way we speak to our audience. And we have to think about that in terms of what will matter the most to them. For instance, are we talking about the best job in the industry, the first job somebody should have out of school, the place where they should work at least once in their career, right? Is that the category of all the jobs I should work at least once, that aspirational piece? Or is it the fastest place to grow skills, or the most fun place to work, or the very next job you should have? Any of those categories can be real, and they influence the way we'll talk to people in everything else we say. Now, whether we manage it or not, our potential candidates, they're going to experience our brand within a frame of referencing, within their frame of reference. So trying to dig into that and actually shape it makes a big difference. Next, value proposition. We talked about this. I heard the panelists were talking about this a little, and it's critical. There are books to be written on value proposition, but as you all know, this is what we offer that's authentic, differentiated, and can influence perception and behavior of our audience, right? And those last pieces are critical. The end of marketing is a change of action. So we're trying to influence perception and behavior with that value proposition. More than anything, this is what we promise to our target candidates, along with those proof points, and it has to make sense with that category. So for example, tying it in, if our category that we intend to compete in for talent is companies where you can build a career, then our value proposition might include the idea that you can be placed on a well-defined career track, that you can get great mentorship and know that you're developing the right skills at the right time. Proof points that you might want to add there then become the specific programs that support it, examples of people who have made it through that path, who've gone from the mailroom all the way to the C-suite. Alternatively, if categories is something like companies where I'll have freedom to define my own path, which is something we see a lot out here in Silicon Valley, then we need to think about how that value proposition reflects maybe the idea that you don't need to follow an established path, but that you can raise your hand and take on a myriad of opportunities at any time with different proof points that following that, such as flexible and self-directed training options, or the chance to work on projects outside your core role, such as Google's famous 20% time. So 3, who do you intend to attract and hire? So intent matters here, and it's really a critical thing that gets lost a lot. Who do we really intend to pursue? It's not just that list of preferred qualifications that we get handed by the hiring managers. It really is about who we will go after, right? And that differs from desire. And this would have been great in person, but to show you or to illustrate the difference between intent and desire, everybody play along with me at home here, if you don't mind. How many people here desire to be in better physical shape, right? Everybody raising their hands. I can't see you, but I'm going to assume you are. Now, how many of you intend to be at the gym today? Yeah, I know I don't, right? So there is a big difference between intent and desire. And the business needs us to deliver on intent, because that is what we are going to will into existence, not just a wish list. So second, specificity matters when we're defining who we intend to attract and hire. Everybody on this call knows this already, right? It's job profiles, but deeper than we usually go. It's not just the type of work, specific skills and key traits that will make them successful. It also includes other elements that might matter. You can think of the most obvious being, living in or willing to relocate to a particular place, like the New York City area. Now, it's easy to assume all of this, but being really specific at the front end can shape where we're going to spend our marketing dollars and how we're going to speak to people. And it's going to keep us aligned with internal stakeholders. So why does that matter? Well, we all know, number one, we're delivering for those stakeholders. We're delivering for hiring managers. We're delivering for the business. But we also know from just earlier in this conversation how important it is to think about relevant hires as or relevant applications as our core metric. Well, the alignment with stakeholders over who we really intend to hire is what will define relevance for us and ensure that this great marketing work we do actually has a really fast and notable impact on our business. Now, 4, as we go through the marketing, as we do the positioning, as we understand what category we're in, and we know who we want to reach, we must show them themselves. More than anything, what we've learned at Google, and in my experience, we've seen that a potential candidate has to truly feel that the company, our company, has a job for someone like me. The way they think about themselves when they look at our firm, are they able to see themselves here, whether that's defined by any of a range of characteristics, from current skills to career aspirations to personal identity, such as by race or sex. We have to recognize that where they see themselves, where we hit the moment of truth in whether or not they will apply, truly is at that job description. Now, anyone who works in a retail space or a consumer-facing business already knows that a product description page is where people get to make that final choice. Here, we need them to see that their skills match, that the kind of people they are will fit in that role. And we also need to make sure that everyone who is qualified feels confident in applying. Now, this means people who aren't necessarily qualified also can clearly see that they're not qualified too. So again, going back to specificity, we need to be clear enough that the people who will be most relevant as applicants are the ones who can see themselves here in that job description. And language in job descriptions matters. You've all heard, I'm sure, about the research that's been done just about things like gendered language and language that can truly influence whether you get what percentage of males to females you get applying. We've done some internal testing around that and seen dramatic improvements on particular job descriptions by taking an intentional approach to shifting language. So finally, I think people talked about a little bit in the panel, there were some questions about getting brand to show up across different touch points and having employee brand aligned. And that's critical here. When we're aligning touch points, it's really important to think about how those touch points, at each one possible, people have a chance to see themselves and see, as I said, someone like me. These help better set expectations for candidates at the top end of the funnel, and they help deliver on those expectations as we go all the way through. This happens out, as everybody knows, on our advertising, on our social media postings, even the terms we use on our website to describe a team or a particular type of work. And it's critically important, this is something in Silicon Valley we particularly struggle with, is it's critically important to use language that our intended candidates would use to describe a role, a team, a job, or an aspiration, not our own internal language. Always worth an extra screen for that. So we're already up to number 5, reach them where they are. So finally, once we're clear on who we're pursuing, what we offer, we need to use the right strategies and tactics to find our intended candidates where they are. This is where the rubber hits the road in a lot of employment marketing. And whenever we want to think about where people are, it's critical to have a good map. So let me just dive in. Here's a map with 2 axes. The intent to find a job, so for our intended audience, for our potential candidates, their intent to look for a job right now, and their intent to work at our company. If you map these out, you'll see a nice grid, 2x2 matrix. I told you I'd been a consultant before. And let's look at low to high. what questions we specifically need to answer for the audience in different places. For people who already have a high intent to look for a job, and they'd have a high intent to work for our company, or at least a company like ours, we're answering the question, why not? Right? They're already in the job market. They already like our company, so why not apply? Our goal here is all about demand collection. So the tactics we use are very specific. They're going to be job distribution and promotion. That means putting our jobs on the places where people are already looking for them, for jobs, and promoting on those platforms. So you can think of LinkedIn, if that's where your preferred candidates or your intended candidates go shopping for jobs. You can think of Monster, all of the general job boards, or very specific ones to a particular field. Here you want to do branded keyword search marketing. That's like, for us at Google, it was Google engineering job as opposed to just software engineering job. And conversion focused social media, your own career site, and again, inclusive job descriptions. A great way to think about demand collection is an old example that comes from the days of newspaper and print advertising, and how mattress companies would do mattress advertising. Every Sunday, the newspaper would come with a big stack of colorful flyers, and buried in there was always the color version of the Sunday comic strips. And people would run through, you'd pull out the paper, you'd flip through all of it just to get to the comics. And as you'd flip through, ignoring all of that, every week there's an ad for a sale on mattresses. Every single week. You might think about that today as the equivalent of the podcast ad for, here's a code for Helix or Casper at the beginning of your podcast. You go past it until one Sunday morning you wake up and think, oh, I really have to think about a new mattress. I just did not get a good night's sleep. And as you're flipping through, you notice, hey, how fortunate we are. There just happens to be a mattress sale today. That didn't create any additional demand. It just was there to collect the demand the moment you recognized it. And so that's a way to think about demand collection for this audience. Now, for people who have a low intent to look for a job right now, but a high intent to work at our company, this is about why now. It's all about the question of why they should actually move to apply. And there's usually we've discovered there's really two separate things that people are considering here. One is they're comfortable in a job, so we'd have to move them out of that. A second effort that we have to put in, and a nuance that we were very interested to discover, was that some people aren't confident enough to actually apply for a job with us. Think about it. If they're really into our brand already, to some applicants, that can be like trying to ask out on a date somebody you're really interested in. There might be extra friction where people need to build up their confidence first. And that's where different content and different approaches can make a difference. So we do things to inspire urgency through macro moments like, hey, it's a new year. Maybe you want to think about a new job. Micro moments. Oh, you've been in the same job for 3 years. Congratulations on that job anniversary. Maybe it's time to move on. And then importantly, for the people who need confidence, we want to think about our help content and confidence building storytelling about how people like them made it through the process, or all of the information about how best to get through the job process or the interview process in our firm. For folks who are looking for a job, but who don't really have an intent to work with us yet, this is where brand really is a big lift, right? We have to answer why me at your company. This is really about cultivating intent. The most straightforward thing we can do here is be present where they look to find jobs. Remember, up in the top quadrant, the top right, we were being present where they were looking for jobs with you. This is about being present where they're looking for jobs more broadly. So think about this let me give you a Google example, or a hypothetical Google example. Imagine we're expanding our hardware to make more phones. Well, phones need antennas, and they need engineers to build antennas. If we never made antennas before, why would people think that there was a job for someone like them? Why would an antenna engineer ever even consider us? They wouldn't. We wouldn't be in that initial set. So we have to reach out to be in places where they would look for antenna engineering jobs. And those are the places where we might actually be a surprise rather than what's expected. So where in the top right, we were answering why not, here, why me is about helping them, again, see that someone like them belongs in our company. This is where things like job distribution on different boards makes a difference in different places, where non-branded keyword search comes into play. So rather than Google antenna engineer job, it would be antenna engineer jobs. This is where our earned media and PR really make a difference, and social media can be incredibly powerful, especially endorsement-focused social media, where we get our followers and those who already believe in us to carry our message forward. So imagine the places, and we've all seen it, but you can imagine, again, staying with that antenna engineering job, imagine a social media post that we share with our audience, maybe on LinkedIn, about those kinds of jobs, and we have our followers tagging their friends who do that kind of work. You know, it's critically important, as I said, to hear, help people understand why me, right? That's the question we need to answer. The last group is the hardest, right? This is, they have a low intent to find a job and they have a low intent to work for our company. This is the long-term investment. This is where we're building significance in partnership with the rest of the business. In all honesty, this lift is much heavier than employment brand could or employment marketing can ever do on its own. And so we shouldn't try. This is where we participate in the broader storytelling of the organization and partner with our comms partners, our PR organization, to weave employment and hiring into messaging where it makes sense. So consider an example where we're opening a new facility, a new office. We're opening an office in a new city, and the executive has the opportunity to speak to the local press about that. Well, speaking about the amount of hiring we're doing is a perfect proof point for the story of how we're dedicated to that community. So with all of that, here's a quick summary of that matrix. And the way I've numbered it is really in the order of what is most easy to reach to most difficult, right? So the people from whom you can collect demand, that's going to be the most straightforward. And it's critical that you succeed there first. Make sure you've got that part of your funnel functioning, because if that doesn't work, as you get people to that moment, the rest can get a lot more expensive and a lot more difficult. Given the time, let me just get us to a quick summary. You've seen these essentials now. You know basically where we need to head. This is a super high level. So I will definitely make sure everybody who wants to, please do reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd love to follow and advance this conversation with you as part of our broader community, because I really do believe in how this can change the trajectory of our businesses. So I want to leave everybody, after focusing on these essentials, with some next steps immediately. I think it's always great to have something you can actually go do. So here they are on a week, month, and quarter basis. First, audit your company across these 5 elements. Think through which one you can make an improvement on first. Don't dive into everything. Don't boil the ocean. Truly look at where could we just start to think a little bit more deliberately, and how would we know if we made a change would make a difference? Over the next month, then, pilot that first change, those first couple changes, and think about how you'll tune as you go. Again, it's understanding your measurement, and that can be quantitative or qualitative. Just knowing, understanding how you'll know it's working or it's not, and actually committing to that in advance will allow you to continue to tune. It's something we've done for years at Google, and it's something that allows us to accelerate a lot more rapidly than without it. And then finally, at the quarter level, report out that success. Share that with the stakeholders you work with. You don't have to reveal all of these changes you're making up front and lay out a perfect roadmap. This is a creative process. It's a creative evolution. But by taking a deliberate approach and then committing to that report at the end, whether it worked or didn't, you will gain greater trust with your stakeholders, you will build your credibility, and you'll improve the way the business operates overall. So with that, let me wrap up. Thank you. And I will watch chat for any questions.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chris. And do add your email there so that we can get in contact with you on LinkedIn. Apparently you have a blocker there so that you can't connect, or maybe
do I? Okay, let me fix that. Yeah, I'll adjust that today.
Wonderful, because I think as your matrix points out, and your entire speech, it's not about why should a good candidate start working for a good company today. It's much more about why should I start working in this position at this company right now. So the questions that you raised, why not, why now, why bother, and why me are really important to try to answer. So really good. Thank you so much, and thank you all for listening in to this entire webinar, part 2. I see that there's still a lot of listeners, and thank you for staying with us as we are learning this tool. And it's been very encouraging, and we'll probably have some more webinars as we come along, as complementing not meeting in person during the Corona era that we all try to live through. Because we have, as we mentioned in the last session, in our research of the candidates and what employers are actually doing, we crown the winners here in what we think are the companies that meet the candidates' expectations the most. And this is the top of the lead table for the US. And I think all of these companies, we mentioned them before, but they are good for you as examples of best practices, interesting ways of approaching the talent communication, and being inspired by. And thank you then again, KPMG and L'Oreal for hosting us, and then also Chris, Malin for sharing your insights and learnings with us today. Miki Johansson from Job Portraits, talking about the authenticity, and then all and every one of you that have been participating in the chat and listening in. So thank you again, everyone, and stay tuned with Potentialpark, and we hope that we will be able to meet you in person or at a webinar later on this year. Thank you again, everyone.